Hey everybody, what's going on? The NHL's trade deadline came and went today with the Montreal Canadiens making one move. Before we get into today's video, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It's as easy as clicking the button in the bottom right hand corner of this video. The Montreal Canadiens made one big splash ahead of the trade deadline today. That was dealing Sean Monahan to the Winnipeg Jets for a first round pick and a conditional third round pick if the Winnipeg Jets win the Stanley Cup. Today, the Montreal Canadiens also made another move ahead of the deadline, dealing goaltender Jake Allen to the New Jersey Devils for a conditional third round pick, which turns into a second round pick if the New Jersey Devils make the playoffs next season and Jake Allen plays at least 40 games in goal. The Montreal Canadiens also retained 50% of Allen's contract. He has the rest of this year and next year remaining on his deal. So the Montreal Canadiens will now only have one retention spot to play with after this season because they'll still be retaining on Jeff Petrie along with Jake Allen. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that situation moving forward. That obviously made things a little bit more complicated in terms of also dealing David Savard. The Montreal Canadiens didn't have to move on Savard, and they ultimately didn't, which made sense because Ken Hughes didn't have to make that decision now. He can push that to the offseason and see if a team is willing to give up a first round pick for Savard at the draft or at next trade deadline, assuming the Montreal Canadiens aren't in the playoff picture. I think that makes a ton of sense because it just doesn't make a lot of sense for Ken Hughes to move off of a veteran leader like Savard for a third round pick or even a late second. That's just not strong asset management. You can see how important Savard is to the young defenseman in this Montreal Canadiens locker room, and soon enough you're going to be adding Lane Hudson to the mix, potentially David Reinbacher as well, and Logan Mailloux. So I think there's a lot of value in keeping Savard around for now. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the Montreal Canadiens shouldn't eventually take assets for Savard, and they're playing a potentially risky game because he is an aging veteran. But I think that it was smart to keep him around now, and you're going to assume that they just didn't get the first round pick they were looking for, so they didn't have to move him now. So I think that was smart asset management by Ken Hughes. But if you move towards what the Canadiens did for Jake Allen, I think it just makes a lot of sense because the Canadiens had a crowded crease. They have Samuel Montembeault in net, and they wanted to get Caden Primo a little more starts, especially down the stretch, to prove whether or not he can continue to be a strong backup goalie in the NHL. You think that Montembeault is going to be that number one for now and at least into the foreseeable future until potentially Jacob Fowler is ready. Fowler is a really intriguing prospect. He's having a dynamite season this year in college. So I think there's a lot of hopes that he eventually becomes the number one goalie in Montreal. But for now, I think it's a strong idea to run a tandem of Montembeault and Primo. There's more consistency present now, and there's not a three-headed monster in goal. So I think there's a lot of winners in that situation. And plus, you get the added bonus of making Allen happy. He's going to a place where he's going to be in a tandem now moving forward. Who knows what the Devils do in the offseason in terms of their goaltending situation, and if they go out swinging for a bigger fish or if they have more of a tandem situation. I think they'll be happy with Allen in net moving forward, at least in a tandem role. But the Montreal Canadiens just continue collecting assets, and that made for a strong deadline period once again for Ken Hughes, collecting whether that's a second or a third round pick plus the first round pick for Sean Monahan. It's hard to say it's anything but a win for Ken Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens during this trade deadline period. That's it for me today from Cook's Corner. As always, let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts are on the Montreal Canadiens trade deadline and what you see them doing in the offseason. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.